and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me on tonight's episode is Jeff Ponchick, the CEO of Mogul. Founded by the former heads of Creator at SoundCloud, Mogul is an all-in-one business management app for musicians and their teams. Mogul's Rocket Money-esque platform allows one to connect the sources that generate an artist's royalties, give them a total picture of their business, and then show where revenue is slipping through the cracks across all rights types. Mogul is tracking over 150 million in royalties across some amazing artists and teams today. So Jeff, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to get started, but first, how's it going?
Pretty good. Can't complain. Happy to be here and very interested about what these impactful three questions will be.
Well, with that, are you ready for your first question?
Let's do it.
Imagine for a second you are sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give him on a personal note, and what one piece of advice would you give him from a business perspective?
I'll just say what instantly came to mind. So I think on personal and sort of business, I would care less about what others think. On a personal level, I think as long as you're not hurting anybody, kind of wave your own flag and do your own thing. And I think that actually kind of applies to your personal life and also business. You can get really caught up in what will the industry think if I launch this feature, or a few people over here did like this change. Maybe I shouldn't have done it, but maybe you should stick with it and kind of push it if you really believe in it. And yeah, I think it would mostly be about sticking to your guns and yeah, just not listening to the press, not listening to the media, just sticking with your mission and not caring what other people think.
That's great advice. Kind of like jumping off of that, how did you come up with the idea of Mogul, and was being an entrepreneur something that you always had in mind for your future?
Yeah, so Mogul's my third company in the music tech space, which joke I always say is I must have a thing for pain. But yeah, the idea for Mogul, I think kind of came in a really different way than I think most people come up with startups. It wasn't really an idea I had at the last company I was at, which was SoundCloud. Basically, my last company, Repost, I sold to SoundCloud. And then I ran the creator division there, and it was a really amazing experience. But starting something, selling it, and being at the parent company, it's a lot for a founder, and I got a little burnt out. And so when I left SoundCloud, I actually took a year off, and me and my co-founder Joey, how we came up with Mogul was we decided to take a year off and sort of enjoy our lives, which is a very nice thing to be able to do if you can. And we just took our time with it. We just talked to musicians. We just caught up with managers. It wasn't just a phone call. It's like, let's get lunch, right? And we really just kind of took a year and tried to find the biggest, hairiest problem we could. And it wasn't necessarily finding the biggest issue from necessarily a money perspective. And I think we did find a problem there's about $1 billion that's lost every year, or it's not paid out to the people it's intended to in the music industry, and that's what we're going after. So that is the problem we're solving. But we kind of were just looking for feelings. So when we talk to artists, we'd say, what part of what part of your business are you the least confident in, right? Or what's keeping you up at night, right? And trying to really kind of ask those types of questions. And we talked to enough people that we're able to sort of lay out all the data and all the findings and all the feelings that we found from folks. And we were able to kind of work up to what we thought was a solution. And that's what Mogul is. And to kind of quickly plug it, if that's okay, what we learned was no one felt like they were getting paid 100% of what was owed in the music industry. No one trusted any of the entities that were paying them. The only tool you have is really to do a kind of expensive legal audit, which costs $30,000 or more to really make sure these people are paying, these distributors, labels, publishers are paying you correctly. And the other kind of weird nuanced issue we found was there's just a lot to manage. So we were finding that artists and their teams were having to manage 10 to 50 different logins to things that made up their royalties and income, and have to do custom data entry and data formatting for each one. And so focused on those sort of three issues. And yeah, what Mogul is we're a lot like Rocket Money or Mint.com for the music industry. So you can connect in your Universal Music dashboard, your YouTube channel, right? You connect up the things that make up your royalties. We centralize it, and then we tell you where the revenue is slipping through the cracks, so you can know what's going on with your business. You can ask the right questions of your partners to make sure they're doing their jobs, and you can manage everything from one place.
That's great. Why do you think so many limitations in gathering that information? Do you think that's just like the way that the industry was kind of built and it's hard to detect all these resources, or people just don't put the energy into finding out?
I think the music industry is just inherently fragmented, right? The way the money's made is usually, in most cases, a rights issue, right? And there's you have publishing, sound recording, and you have subsets of those: mechanical publishing, public performance, publisher share, public performance, writer share. And there are different companies that will collect on these royalties, but maybe they only do it in certain territories or on certain platforms. And so it's just one of these things where I think there's just a lot to manage, but there's also a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes in the way in which these companies are made up. They may or may not be the right partner for you based on your audience and the basically makeup of your audience and your business. So yeah, I think our bet is that the industry is fragmented. Our bet is that it's going to continue to be fragmented and the data will continue to be bad, unfortunately. And that drives the need for our product, right? People need a simple one-stop solution to just frankly understand what the hell's going on.
Totally. All right, next question. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we all know that's no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they can be good. So, what's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
Yeah. So I've said this on, I think, a few other podcasts, but I have my tin hat theory about the music industry. And basically, I think that, I think people will probably agree and say, yeah, that makes sense. But I think the makeup of how it works is interesting, worth touching on. I think the music industry itself is not incentivized to actually pay artists in the way that it should. So you look at all of these CMOs, platforms, collection societies, and there are, as I mentioned earlier, over $1 billion per year that doesn't make it to the people it's intended to, right? And these entities' sole jobs is to pay out on royalties. So why is such a huge portion not being paid out? And what happens with these royalties is they get generated and a couple years go by, and if no one claims them, it goes into a lost property sort of state, and it just gets given in many cases to the major labels and the major publishers. Now look at who are on the boards of these companies, okay? It's the people who get hundreds of millions of dollars per year without doing any of the work. And so when I look at these, we've had to integrate over 150 different companies into Mogul. And I've become an expert on just frankly the dashboards and the tech that all of these companies offer. And it is so old and backdated. And meanwhile, the CEOs of these companies are saying, we invest in tech and we care and we paid out all this money. But I just think the industry could be doing better. And I think there's something happening behind the scenes that is unfortunately nefarious in nature that is not really that interested in paying out on the independent black box that, yeah, effectively should be getting paid out on. And I think a huge part of it's education, right? Like a lot of artists don't know what to sign up for or how the music industry works, but these companies are basically making websites and saying, hey, you need to look us up and figure out who we are and sign up and register. And there are these steps, like there's a massive fund that requires you to mail in a voided check to set up an account, which I get maybe that made sense 10 years ago, but how many young kids today are going to get a checkbook, write void across it, and then mail a letter to set up an account, right? Like, to me, that almost borderlines not wanting young artists to sign up in a weird way. But it technically isn't that, if that makes sense, right? You can still sign up, but they're just not incentivized to make it easy, and they're not making it easy. And that it kind of boils my blood, and that's sort of my inside baseball tin hat theory.
I appreciate the transparency. I think your next gig is like undercover agent of the music industry.
Yeah. What's the psych class thing? What's it called?
Oh,
I forget what it's called.
oh,
The detective.
yeah, a magnifying glass. Exactly. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
get you one of those. All right, final question. Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked plenty of questions, whether for industry conferences, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, there has to be one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question, and what would be your answer?
That's good. What is that question? I think the question I would like to be asked in marketing environments and panel environments is, what are your opinions on what works to actually gain users for your music tech startup? And unfortunately, the answer would be not doing podcasts and not doing panels and interviews. A lot of founders in the music industry can get caught up going to networking events, doing things that kind of spotlight you and sort of your ego as a person. But if you're an early stage startup in music tech, you should not be focused on those things. You should be focused on customer support. You should be focused on getting 100 people to love your product. And I have found that acquiring customers, at networking events, panels, things like that, is not the best use of time. And it's a little ironic because I'm here and I'm very happy to be here. But I've seen so many founders get caught up in that, I need to have press. I need to be this shiny thing in the music industry. And that's just not how it works. That's not the reality of how get your first 1,000 paying users. You need to find other channels. So that would be my wish that someone asked of me. And I think it's a little antithetical to the situation I would be in.
Well, it's about time we close out tonight's episode. But Jeff, thanks again for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And to everyone listening, hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Stay tuned for next week of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking 3 powerful questions. See you next time.